Jim Greenstein, Chancellor of the PA State System of Higher Education. Tell us about what that system includes.
Sure. The Pennsylvania State System of Higher Education was founded in 1982, I think, or three. And it brought together what were then 14 universities, the oldest of which today, I'm actually going to celebrate its birthday tomorrow, Cheney University, which I think is 187 years or something like that. The youngest is in the 120s. So they've been around for a very long time. They're very regional. They're all across the state. They are born of their communities. Most of them started as teachers' colleges. As public K-12 education began to sort of take off across the state, we needed more teachers. And of course, they've evolved, over time. So now most of them are sort of comprehensive universities, which offer instruction in a number of disciplines with the greatest concentration. It's interesting. They started as teachers' college. That was the biggest workforce need. Today, the concentration, of course, we still have a lot of teacher training, but there's also our biggest subjects are STEM, business, healthcare, education. So we continue to sort of pursue our role as, in some ways, helping the state of Pennsylvania develop the workforce it needs so that its economy can thrive. And that's basically who we were born to support workforce development and to provide uplift for people in their communities across the entire state. And that's what we do to this very day. It's a great place.
Now, approximately how many students are enrolled at the 10 school system?
So we've got about 85,000 students currently across our universities.
And how's the geographic distribution of these schools across the state? If you can try to draw us a picture.
I can. We go from, I'm going to get this, I'm still a few years into my newness in Pennsylvania, but we're from Erie in the northwest to
extreme northwest corner,
right, all the way down to Westchester, and then you can go the other way as well from East Stroudsburg up in the northeast, all the way over to California, I guess would be in the southwest.
Now, how are the state systems distinguished from other schools around the state? Obviously, you're aware of the competition out there.
Yeah, so we are the people's universities. That's the way I like to refer to us. We are state-owned universities, right? And we are four-year institutions, obviously. We are by far and away now the most affordable four-year option in the state of Pennsylvania. Our bread and butter is the low and middle income students that we've always served from the regions. And we've done that well for many, many years. What's so interesting is how modern we have become, and I think this is something which people don't necessarily appreciate. So I was on a visit with a number of folks to one of our schools, Millersville University, and we were taken by the president and the dean of the College of Science and Technology. We went to biology, we went to robotics, we went to meteorology, and in every stop, there were employers who work in partnership with the university, with internships, helping pull people through the university.
That wasn't just for the benefit of your visit?
No, of course not. It happens all the time. And actually, we were there with one in the biology lab, where the biology lab was actually sponsored by the employer because they were using it as an opportunity to do research in areas that, and of course, it so benefits the region and surrounding Lancaster community. And I was saying to the folks I was with, and you could just see they were in awe of this because of the internships, the engagement with employer partnerships, the recognition that, Millersville's open for business. It's doing really cool stuff. And I had to say it in front of the president. President Wuba is a wonderful guy. I said, Millersville's great. I'm so glad we're here. But I looked at our visitors and I said, you would find this at every single one of our campuses. It's just, it's phenomenal what we do. And that's the difficulty, how to get the message out that it's not, it's not your grandparents' higher education. It's not even your parents' higher education. And at the same time, we have all the trappings that you think of a residential institute. You have great sports teams. You have residential life. The whole range of social and co-curricular activities on each of our campuses.
So let's expand on the educational mission at the state-owned schools. And you said that they started out as primarily training for the job shortage at the time, which was teachers. Yeah. So that was how many years ago, approximately? Well, before your tenure,
125
of course.
to 100 is a long years.
A lot has changed in 125 years. So how do you contrast that mission with what we're doing today? You have to branch out, don't you?
Sure. So, I still think, it's profoundly interesting. They've changed profoundly. Higher education has changed even the last 10, 15 years. But in some ways, and this is what's so interesting to me about public higher education, is that we've changed profoundly in order that we remain the same, that our mission, we remain true to our mission, which is workforce development and social mobility, right? We take students from their communities, we lift them up, they come into and through our colleges into great jobs. Most of our students stay here in Pennsylvania. They earn good salaries. You know, what's fascinating to me, and I've learned this really from being here, is that if you're in one of our regional communities, you rely on these universities for your next generation of business person, of healthcare professional, of teacher, et cetera. So it's not just uplifting the students, you know, into and through college, into sustaining careers for themselves and their families, giving back to the community, but it's also supplying the community with its next generation, keeping our communities vital. So that there was some research done into our kinds of schools. And defining us as stewards.
Who did the research? How objective, how useful was it to you?
It was by a group called the American Association of State Colleges and Universities. And it was about a dozen or so years ago. And they referred to our kinds of universities as stewards of place. And that's exactly what we are. We're stewards of place. And that mission of lifting people up, lifting communities up, providing upward mobility while we're providing the state with the work is something that we do today. It's just that we've changed dramatically in order to pursue that mission. It's fascinating to me.
What happens to your students typically after they graduate?
So after they graduate, 10 years out, we have great data on this, 10 years out after graduation, 65% of our students are living and working in Pennsylvania. They are getting jobs largely in the areas where they got their degrees, which makes sense. Business, go into business, healthcare, et cetera. They're earning...
That's good news. Doesn't always work out that way.
Correct. And they're earning good wages. I think the average 10 years out is 62, was just updated, $62 or so thousand a year. The return on investment is high. Our graduates over a lifetime will earn about $900,000 more over their lifetime than they would if they simply stopped education at high school. So there's a good return on their investment that accounts for the fact that they paid tuition, et cetera. So there's a good return on their, for the state, there's a great return for the students, obviously, and there's a great return for the regions that we serve.
And speaking of the state, do a lot of these students manage to stay in Pennsylvania?
They do,
Of course,
yeah.
I'm alluding to what they call brain drain.
Yeah.
We'd like to keep the talent here when we can.
2/3 of our students 10 years out will be here in the state of Pennsylvania. It's and the other interesting thing, which is worth pointing out, is that, you know, there's a lot of conversation about, you know, in the humanities, does program discipline matter? We find that our humanists and our social scientists, 10 years after graduation, they're earning more or less the same as people who graduated in business and STEM. So everyone's doing well. The other thing we find, which I think is vitally important, and it's exactly what you want to see in public higher education, people who start with us and they enroll from a low-income household will be earning more or less the same 10 years out as people who start with us from a higher income household. And it's not because we're dragging people down.
And you have data that shows that.
Absolutely. It's because we're lifting people up. And when you layer race on top of that equation, you see pretty much the same result. It is powerful data. It is inspiring. It shows exactly what you want to see in public higher education. It is an engine of social mobility, and it works for everybody.
Now, I'm guessing some of our viewers are learning about the state system schools right at this moment, so let's explore some other things they're interested in, and namely, of course, that comes down to tuition. So how much is it among the network of schools? So
the average tuition is about $7,700. There's another $1,000. It's a fee for a technology fee, so call it $8,700 all in. Now, I want to be clear that individual campuses will have fees for the student fees for things like the sporting facilities and other aspects. And there's room and board. You have to live in, you have to eat somewhere. You don't necessarily have to, everyone will need to live somewhere and eat.
Right, so that's additional, right?
That would be additional. So when I think of the price that a student pays, we have an internal term of art. We think of it in terms of net average price, which is after all of the scholarships and the aid and the support that you might get from the federal or state government. How much is the average person? What's the average tuition, room and board? In our system, it's about $16,000. It's lower for low-income students because they have more access to aid, federal aid called Pell, as well as state aid from FIA. and higher for people from higher income backgrounds because they have less access to need-based aid. But it is the lowest by far. It is the lowest.
How does it compare to other schools statewide?
In the state, it is the lowest it is the most affordable, the lowest cost option for all four-year institutions in the state. Yeah.
Now, given the complications of inflation and the COVID-19 pandemic, given those factors, how has the state system managed to keep tuition at the same level for 6 years? And you often mention this when you talk to media.
So so we started, in effect, by saying, look, we cannot continue to impose rising costs on our students. We're in danger of pricing ourselves out of the market. We saw data back in 2015, 16, before I got here, actually, which demonstrated that our low and middle income students are leaving us, are enrolling at lower and lower rates. They're leaving us much more rapidly than higher income students, which is a signal that you're beginning to price yourself out of the market. So that's not right. We're a public university system. We're here for the people of Pennsylvania, low and middle income people in particular. And so, it became a kind of a mission-oriented thing. We have to freeze tuition. So initially we did this by just curtailing our expenditures, by just recognizing that we're going to have to tighten our belts.
So you had to make certain cuts. Can you give us examples?
Sure. We made sure that we looked at our organizational structure. We looked at our academic programs. We looked carefully at the work that we were doing and where there were things that were simply not essential to the size of our
universities. Did you cut programs, faculty?
Yeah, we had to reduce our employees considerably. Our enrollment shrunk, as you probably know. Our top level enrollment was about 120,000 in 2010. Now we're at about 85,000. So you don't need as many employees to serve 30% less students. I am proud to say, and this is something that we worked very hard on, I am proud to say that we were able to reduce those, because people are our most important asset. We're a people business, and we have fabulous people, and I am proud to say that we were able to get there almost entirely without relying on termination. We used retirement incentives and other means to working closely together across campuses. So if job openings were available here, we could, if people were at risk, we could support them in moving between universities. So we were able to achieve very significant reductions in a short period of time with the least amount of direct impact on our people. I still regret the hardship that we caused, real people and real families, but we were able to minimize that significantly.
Now, it occurs to me that an economy enacted in the last couple of years would be consolidation of some of the schools.
Yeah.
In other words, just a few years ago, it was 14 schools. Now it's down to 10. Which schools have you consolidated, and what's been the result to your bottom line as a result of that consolidation?
So, what happens, so it was 6 schools into 2. So in the West, California, Edinburgh, and Clarion were integrated into something called a new school called Penn West. So we're one of the
4 were combined into 1.
3 into 1.
3.
Clarion, Edinburgh, and California became Penn West. And Penn West is in a way it's interesting. There are very few new universities in the 21st century. Penn West is a new university, right? And then in the Northeast, Bloomsburg, Lock Haven, and Mansfield were integrated into Commonwealth University, and it actually, the logic follows on from the question we just discussed. Is as our enrollments are declining, and these are rural areas, many of these are, or certainly suburban areas, the population declining very rapidly, so that enrollments are declining, by 35 and 40%. So what happens if you're trying to manage a university which is declining quite rapidly, and you obviously have to contract the amount of expenditure? So that you're basically spending no more than you're earning, mostly through tuition and obviously state appropriations. So watching what was happening in those schools, they were going to find themselves in a place where maybe they could only support 20 or 30 academic programs. So think majors, minors, degrees. Well, the thing is, students want choice. Turns out, if you're in one of the communities want choice too. So if I'm relying on my local university to supply me with healthcare workers, I don't just need one flavor of nurse. I need geriatric. I need the full range. I don't just need accountants if I'm looking for business people. I need the full range of specialties, right? So program breadth is important to students. it's important to the communities who rely on those universities for their next generation of professional. So when you're in those circumstances, the only way to ensure program breadth is to bring institutions together. And so it's hard work. I don't recommend doing it for fun. But I am very proud of the fact that our folks in both of those regions have, and we're only a year and a half into the work, have found themselves to a place where
into the
consolidations, where actual implementation, where schools that would have been only able to manage, say, 30 programs, their students have access to 80 or 90, and that was the goal, right? And tremendously important work in achieving that goal. And we're seeing other kinds of advantages. And I was talking to one of our presidents, who was letting me know that they have internships. Internships are really important for students, right? As they're going through their degree program, getting a placement with an employer, they learn about obviously they learn about what it means to be effective in the workforce,
to have a job and be in the job place.
But they also open up. It helps them build their CV so they can be more presentable after they graduate. Fantastic results so they're. Yeah, and all of our schools have internships. They tend to negotiate them with employers in the region. Well, Penn West operates across the entire western part of Pennsylvania, and they're beginning to build employer partnerships on that wide-scale regional basis. And students from one university can get an internship at one of the other campuses that's part of Penn West, and because they have housing reciprocity, they can move there and live and take it. So there's all sorts of interesting affordances that are taking place as a result of these integrations. Still early days, and it is hard work. And I want to take a moment and just to sort of applaud the people who are doing it. They are faculty and staff and just tremendous at all level. And every time I go and visit, and I spend a lot of time on campuses, I get goosebumps because of what they're accomplishing and what they're doing. And I know it's hard, and I know it's challenging, and I have so much admiration and respect for them.
One more question before we get into the governor's proposed appropriation for your department. Now, after several years of declining enrollment, recently you've said that enrollment is up the last couple years. Is that right? And if so what do you attribute that to?
So funnily enough, price matters. So when you freeze tuition 6 years in a row, and all of a sudden the price differential, I did say before that we're the most affordable four-year option. Well, because we've frozen tuition 6 years in a row, the price difference has grown in our favor. So it turns out that price matters. And as you become more affordable, so we have, in the last 2 years, our first-time student enrollments, first-time full-time students, up 3.4% this past fall, 10% if you look at the two, fall 23 and fall 22 combined, for the first time in a dozen years. It's like, thank goodness. And it's inspiring to me. It makes the work, the hard work, it makes it worthwhile, because we are here to serve students. And we're beginning to see, them come back into the affordability matters in other ways too. So we're seeing for the first time that our students are staying with us longer, right? They're not stopping out. We have higher retention and graduation rates as a consequence.
Now let's get into the governor's proposal for your appropriation. So just what is he proposing in his new budget that affects you?
So the governor starts with a vision that is, in my view, 100% accurate. We've been talking about it since I've been here in the General Assembly with higher ed leaders. Pennsylvania has been underserved by the Commonwealth in terms of investment. We're 47th or something in the nation in terms of investment in higher education. As a consequence, even though we're the most affordable option as the public state-owned universities, we're consistently higher than four-year options in other states, right? So like the third or fourth most expensive. And this is a direct result of state investment. So the governor and
your appropriation is up this year, for starters.
We are up. Our appropriation has been up 16% in the last 2 years. And so good. We're making progress. We're making great. But this is just within the Pennsylvania state system. We're 20% of higher education in the state of Pennsylvania. So the governor's saying, hey, wait a minute. This is a problem across the state. Not enough just to, patchy great. But we got to do more, and we've got to do it at greater scale. And so, it's really three planks to the vision. One of them is affordability, right? What was happening at PASHE is happening across the state. We're pricing people out of the market, out of higher education. If they can't get into and through, where do we get our nurses from? Where do we get our teachers from? Where do we get our security workers from, our police force? And you could go on, right? And it's not just universities, it's community colleges, it's vocational and other schools. If we can't get people into and through post-secondary education, we cannot build the workforce. Affordability is critical. Plank number one for the governor. We've got to make post-secondary education more affordable. Massive. Plank number two is we need to make, and this is from an institutional perspective, we need to make funding more predictable. And we need to ensure that our taxpayers and our students and families have visibility into what they get for their money.
That sounds like stability.
Stability for the institution, accountability and transparency, right? In some ways, consumer protection.
For the families.
For the families and the taxpayers, right? And that's this sort of discussion about performance-based funding. It's like, okay, we're going to support you with state funding, but we're going to expect certain outcomes as a consequence of that support. Now, we do that inside the Pennsylvania state system of higher education. The board gets money from the state. We distribute it to our universities using a performance-based funding model. It introduces a very high degree of accountability and transparency, and it drives towards outcomes, in our case, enrollments and completion. And I believe where the governor's going is enrollments, completion, and workforce development, good. So affordability, fantastic. Performance-based funding, fantastic. The other component is, you look at systems like the Pennsylvania state system, and there are a number of advantages to being part of a system. And so the governor's proposal is, let's take our community colleges and our Pennsylvania state system, four-year universities, put them together into a new system.
Yes.
And some of those, and let's use that new construct, that new structure, to achieve some of those affordances.
Now, given that framework, what do you think are the questions that should occur to everyone, given that limited information from the governor?
So, I mean, to me, this is...
Because all we know at this point is he wants to merge the community colleges and the state system schools, so I'm sure you're in a position to anticipate concerns.
So to me, and I said this yesterday at hearing, to me this is a tremendous opportunity. I have been here 5.5 years. I have been, because of the integration process, I think I got to testify every week to the General Assembly. It was every quarter, but it was multiple times a quarter. And so, and the dialogue was all about higher education in the state of Pennsylvania, and that's a good thing. And frankly, I have so much confidence and faith in members of the General Assembly understanding the connection between higher education and the workforce. Governor comes along with a powerful vision which resonates with concepts we've been talking about: affordability, performance-based funding that drives to outcomes with accountability and transparency, the power of systems to effectively achieve greater outcomes with greater cost efficiency. We've been talking about this stuff for a long time. Here's an opportunity to engage in a discussion and to really move the needle in a way that ensures that Pennsylvania sort of lifted up from the bottom of those league tables, and delivers for the people of Pennsylvania who deserve a post-secondary education opportunities that are unparalleled across the nation. That would be my view. So, applaud the governor for the boldness. There isn't a lot of detail, and that was obviously some concern to...
Well, that's right. Let me interrupt just for a second to share a headline that appeared in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chancellor, comment on this. The headline stated the lawmakers were frustrated because they didn't get more detail on the plans from you. So tell us what happened in just a couple minutes.
Well, so the governor's in a very early part of the process, and change management. I
think they were surprised that these details weren't shared with you, the legislators.
I think the details are an evolution, right? They're under development, and we'll learn. And to me, I'm excited that the conversation is happening, right? I have been involved in conversations. The governor's people brought the leaders of the higher ed leaders together, the state related, myself, the privates, the community colleges. We had great discussions about affordability, about workforce development, et cetera. They were reported to the governor that in a way that informed his blueprint. There are working groups now that are going forward. They involve community college presidents, university presidents. They can talk about the system. They're engaging with labor. They're engaging with experts within the universities to talk about performance-based funding. So this stuff takes time.
Well, how about this, Chancellor? How likely is it you'll be called in when the plan reaches another stage?
Oh, I'm not worried about access to the conversation. Trust me. No. I mean, this is a small town, Harrisburg, And that's a good thing. And I appreciate the fact that people have my cell phone number and they use it, and I appreciate the fact that when I use somebody's cell phone, they pick up. So I think it's a tremendous opportunity to pursue a conversation, to advance higher education in a way which will benefit the people of Pennsylvania. And frankly, that resonates with a theme that we've been talking about cross aisle, both chambers, for years. I think we have a tremendous opportunity right now.
We have time for a couple more things to talk about, Chancellor, and the governor has also talked about his plan to limit tuition for certain students, and the way we understand it is it involves an income limit for the families, $70,000 a year, and the tuition limit would be $1,000. And how do you feel about that as a starting point? And again, what questions occur to you immediately given that limited information?
So affordability is so important in ways that we've already discussed. I mean, it is the number. If you had to, the fix for the challenges that we face in post-secondary education, the linkages to the workforce are complex and they're numerous, but the number one, and we've talked about, is affordability. If it's not affordable to enough people, it's game over, right? So getting money into the hands of students so they can get into and through college is really, really important. What's the right amount? What's the right distribution model? There's a lot of discussion that needs to happen, but just launching that out there is so powerful, right? It's a starting point. And we're surrounded, and this is well known. New York, which apparently is right next door. In New York State, there's an Excelsior, I think it's called, scholarship, where students from households under $125,000 can attend SUNY, which is the state public university system, or CUNY, which is the city of New York's version of public university system, for free. It's a competitive world, right? Our students, bless them, they should go where they can get the best opportunity and the lowest price, and they do. And we also know that students who attend an institution out of state, they're less likely to come back and work in state. So attacking affordability is absolutely critical. First up in almost anything we do in higher education.
Last question, Chancellor Greenstein. As far as having both your appropriations hearings the same day, it strikes me that could be a rather arduous task to take questions from all these lawmakers in the same day. And how was your energy level after those hearings? Tell us briefly.
Well, so I was glad it was over. I actually think I prefer doing it in a day, having done it now a number of different ways. I did expect that today in the pool I would set a personal best. I did not. I missed by a minute, but maybe there's always next year.
Dan Greenstein, Chancellor of the PA State System of Higher Education, thank you.
Thanks so much.